Have you ever felt like something just isn't right in your relationship, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it? Maybe it's the subtle changes in his behavior, the little things that don't feel like they used to, and yet you find yourself questioning, is he cheating or is he simply losing interest? You know that feeling? The one where doubt creeps in, stealing your peace of mind? But here's the truth. You don't have to keep guessing. Relationships are meant to lift us up, not drag us down. They should empower you, make you feel seen, heard, and appreciated. When someone truly values you, they will show it through their actions. But when someone starts slipping away, whether physically or emotionally, you feel it. You feel it in your gut. You sense that something is changing. And if you're honest with yourself, deep down, you know it. And while it's not easy to face the truth, you have to. Because your peace of mind is priceless. You deserve honesty. You deserve to know the truth. And that's exactly why it's so important to recognize the signs before they completely consume your heart. What if I told you that there are clear signals backed by psychology that will tell you if he's truly losing interest, or worse, if he's cheating? What if you could spot them early and take action to protect your emotional well-being? It's not about being paranoid or overthinking. It's about being smart, being aware, and being in control of your own happiness. Now, here's the deal. In this video, we're going to break down the 5 major signs that can indicate a shift in your relationship. These aren't just random red flags. They're backed by deep psychological insights into human behavior. Understanding these signs gives you the power to make informed decisions about your future. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to look out for. And here's the best part. You'll walk away empowered. You'll have the clarity you need to either reignite the spark or protect your heart from further hurt. So stick with me till the end. The insights shared here can change the course of your relationship and your life. Trust me, it's worth it. You owe it to yourself to stay tuned. Let's dive in. Trust. It's the backbone of every meaningful relationship. Without trust, a relationship becomes nothing more than a fragile shell ready to crumble at the first sign of pressure. Think about it. When you feel trusted, when you trust someone completely, there's a sense of security that surrounds you. It's the foundation that lets both of you grow together without fear or doubt. But when that trust begins to erode, everything changes. It's like a crack in the foundation of a house. At first, it's small, barely noticeable. But over time, it grows bigger. And if left unchecked, it can tear everything apart. The danger of not recognizing the signs of distrust early enough is that you risk giving your energy, your heart, to someone who may not be doing the same. You give your time, your love, and your trust, only to find out that they've started pulling away. That's when the pain starts. The nagging feeling that something isn't right, that you're no longer a priority, that your trust is being broken. The truth is, trust isn't just about believing that someone won't cheat. It's about believing they have your best interests at heart. It's about feeling safe enough to be vulnerable, knowing they won't take advantage of your openness. When that trust is lost, it's hard to feel emotionally safe. You start questioning everything, the late nights, the lack of communication, the sudden distance. Every little action becomes a potential warning sign. And here's the catch. Trust once broken is not easy to rebuild. It takes time, effort, and a deep commitment to honesty. If someone isn't willing to fight for that trust, the relationship is already in trouble. When trust is present, everything flows naturally. You don't question their words. You don't feel the need to constantly check their phone or ask where they've been. You're not waiting for the other shoe to drop. Instead, you feel confident, valued, and secure in your connection. But the moment trust begins to slip, you're left with uncertainty and fear. And that's when these signs begin to show up. Human beings are naturally wired to sense when something isn't quite right. Our instincts have evolved to pick up on subtle changes in behavior, especially when it comes to relationships. When someone's attention shifts away from you or their behavior starts to feel off, you feel it in your gut. Your instincts kick in and you start questioning what's going on. This is where the danger lies. If you ignore these feelings or talk yourself out of them, you risk allowing the relationship to spiral without even knowing why. Now, consider this. Trust is not just about preventing cheating, but about emotional honesty. It's about both people feeling secure enough to be themselves without fear of judgment. When trust is intact, you don't need to second-guess every action. There's no room for insecurity. But when trust starts to fade, small cracks start to appear. He might not even be aware of it at first, but you will feel the shift. This is the crucial point where many people overlook the warning signs. They may convince themselves that things are just a phase, that everything will go back to normal, but it rarely does. If emotional distance is left unchecked, it will grow. You deserve to be in a relationship where trust is actively nurtured. A relationship where communication flows freely and where both people work together to keep the bond strong. If that's missing, you're already on the road to a more painful outcome. You've likely heard people say it's not what he says, it's what he does. That's true. Actions speak louder than words. If the words don't match the actions, something is off. Trust doesn't just live in the promises people make. It lives in the way they show up every day, in the small gestures, and in their consistency. It's in the quiet moments when you're not even thinking about it. Like when they show up when they say they will, when they listen to you without distractions, when they make an effort to be present in your life. But when the signs of trust slipping start to show, when the promises are broken, when the words are empty, when the little things begin to fade away, that's when doubt creeps in. And that doubt, if left unchecked, can tear apart everything you've built together. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens faster than you think. Think back to the times when you felt most secure in your relationship, when you knew without a doubt that your partner had your back. That feeling is what trust provides. It's the assurance that no matter what happens, you're in this together. But when trust begins to break, it's like a silent force slowly tearing at the fabric of your connection. That's when you start looking for answers, trying to understand what went wrong. But here's the good news. By recognizing the signs early, you can take control of the situation. You don't have to sit in uncertainty, letting your emotions be dragged through the mud. You have the power to take action, to communicate openly, and to protect yourself from further hurt. You are not powerless in this situation. Trust is a two-way street, and if it's not being respected, you have every right to stand up for yourself. Relationships are meant to bring you joy, not to drain your energy or make you feel insecure. You deserve to feel valued, to feel safe, and to feel like you matter. And if someone can't offer you that, it's time to reevaluate whether they belong in your life. Don't let fear keep you stuck. Trust your instincts. Trust yourself. The truth is, trust is more than just a concept, it's a feeling. And if that feeling starts to slip away, don't ignore it. Recognize it for what it is. Protect your heart. Protect your peace. You deserve a relationship where trust is unwavering, where both of you show up every day ready to build something strong and lasting. And if you're not getting that, it's time to move on before the cracks turn into a collapse. You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle shift in the air. The emotional distance. It starts small, almost imperceptible, but soon enough, you begin to realize something has changed. He's not the same person he used to be. There's a gap now, an invisible wall that wasn't there before. It's like he's physically present, but emotionally, he's miles away. And the worst part, he may not even notice it. Or worse, he may be pretending that everything is fine. Emotional distance doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, creeping change that builds up over time. At first, it's the small things. He's not as quick to respond to your texts. Conversations feel more like transactions than meaningful exchanges. You might find that he's becoming more absorbed in his own world, leaving you on the outside looking in. When a person pulls away emotionally, it's not just about them needing space. It's a sign that something deeper is happening. You may start to question, is he tired? Is he stressed? Maybe it's work. And while those are possible explanations, they don't account for the shift you feel. Emotional distance is a red flag, a warning sign that something is changing within the relationship. And if you're not careful, it could signal a deeper problem, a loss of interest. This is when the connection you once had starts to fade away, like an old photograph slowly losing its color. Here's the thing, humans crave connection. It's wired into us. We need it to thrive. But when someone you care about pulls away, it creates a void. The gap between you becomes more noticeable every day, and it starts to eat away at your confidence. You begin questioning your value, your worth, and whether you're even important anymore. You start wondering, what did I do wrong? And that self-doubt is a dangerous place to be. It can blind you to the truth. Let's be clear. Emotional distance isn't just about physical absence. It's not just the times when he's out late or spending more time at work. It's about the emotional energy. It's the lack of effort in maintaining the bond you once shared. He doesn't show the same interest in your day, your thoughts, or your feelings. He stops asking the little questions, the ones that show he cares. How was your day? What's on your mind? When that level of engagement starts to fade, the emotional disconnect becomes more obvious. The pain of emotional distance is that it's hard to confront. It's not as tangible as someone outright telling you they're losing interest. Instead, it builds over time, slowly eroding the connection between you. It's like being in a room with someone but feeling like you're speaking to a stranger. You're right there in the same space, but there's no real connection. And that emotional absence can feel isolating, like you're alone in the relationship, no matter how close you are physically. But here's what you need to understand. This shift isn't about you. It's about the relationship. It's about a change that's happening on a deeper level. Emotional distance happens when one partner starts to emotionally withdraw, and sometimes they don't even realize it. They might feel overwhelmed with their own life, or they might be struggling with something internally, but the truth is, you can't afford to ignore the signs. Emotional neglect doesn't just hurt, it robs you of the connection you deserve. The natural instinct when faced with emotional distance is to try to bridge the gap, to make things right again. But here's where many people go wrong. They push harder, they try to reconnect in ways that feel forced, and in doing so, they lose their sense of self. They start bending over backward to get attention, to earn affection, all the while neglecting their own needs and desires. But this only leads to frustration, because the more you try to pull them back, the further away they feel. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. It slips right through your fingers. At this point, it's crucial to take a step back and assess the situation from a place of clarity. Yes, emotional distance can feel painful, but it's also a signal that something needs to change. You can't keep investing your emotional energy in a relationship that's no longer giving back. It's like watering a plant that's not growing. It's time to examine the roots. What's really going on beneath the surface? If you continue to ignore the emotional disconnect, you're essentially teaching yourself to settle for less than you deserve. You see, emotional distance is often the precursor to something more serious. It's the quiet before the storm. It's the moment when you feel the disconnect widening, and instead of addressing it, you allow it to persist. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to rebuild the emotional closeness that was once there. The spark starts to fade, and the relationship begins to feel more like a duty than a partnership. This is the time to be real with yourself. Ask yourself the tough questions. Do I feel loved? Do I feel valued? If the answer is no, then the emotional distance you're experiencing is likely not a phase. It's a sign of something deeper. It could be that his feelings are changing, or perhaps he's already emotionally checked out without ever saying it aloud. But no matter what, you cannot ignore this. The longer you allow emotional distance to grow unchecked, the more difficult it will be to fix. You deserve a relationship where emotional closeness is a priority, not something you have to fight for. You deserve a connection where both of you are present, engaged, and willing to nurture the bond that ties you together. Don't settle for a relationship that leaves you feeling empty and alone. Your emotional well-being matters. Trust your instincts. If you feel the distance, don't be afraid to confront it. You have the right to seek clarity and to protect your heart. Emotional distance isn't just a minor issue. It's a signal that something needs to change. Whether it's a conversation, a shift in priorities, or a deeper understanding of each other's needs, it's time to face the reality of what's going on. Your emotional peace is worth it. Communication is the lifeblood of any relationship. It's how we connect, how we share our thoughts and feelings, how we navigate the highs and lows of life together. But when communication starts to change, it's a warning sign that something deeper may be at play. If he's cheating or losing interest, there's one thing that will almost always happen: the communication will shift. And when it does, it's your cue to pay attention. In a healthy relationship, communication is fluid, it's constant. You talk about your day, your thoughts, your struggles. You share your joys and frustrations. It's not just about talking, it's about connecting. You feel seen, heard, and understood. But when that connection starts to fade, so does the quality of the communication. At first, the change might be subtle. He might take longer to reply to texts or calls. The conversations that used to flow naturally now feel forced or awkward. You might start to notice that instead of engaging with you in a meaningful way, he offers one-word responses or seems distracted when you talk. This shift can leave you feeling rejected, confused, and ultimately insecure. You start wondering, why doesn't he want to talk to me anymore? What's going on? This is one of the clearest signs that emotional distance is starting to creep in. When someone is losing interest, they stop engaging on the same level. They pull back from deep conversations, avoid meaningful exchanges, and often become more closed off. When communication dries up, so does the bond. You can feel it in your gut. It's like the space between you grows, and with it, the distance in the relationship. Let's be clear about this. People change and life gets busy, but in a committed relationship, the desire to communicate should not fade. The need to share should still be there. If his communication patterns suddenly start to shift, if he's no longer as responsive, or if he becomes distant or secretive, it's not just about being busy or tired. It's a sign that something else is happening. Psychologically speaking, communication is one of the most significant ways humans connect with one another. It's how we maintain intimacy and keep a relationship strong. When that communication weakens, the relationship starts to unravel. When someone begins to pull away, they often do so by withdrawing their words. They stop sharing their thoughts, their plans, or even their feelings. And in many cases, they might even start hiding things from you, whether it's something as small as not telling you about a meeting, or as significant as avoiding the truth about where they've been. Secrecy becomes a key part of their new communication style. This shift in communication is more than just a minor inconvenience. It's a breakdown in the foundation of your connection. When communication stops flowing freely, it's often a sign that something is wrong. He might be getting emotionally invested elsewhere, or may already be emotionally checked out, but either way, the lack of communication will start to chip away at the trust and intimacy that you once shared. Have you ever had the experience of trying to talk to someone only to feel like you're talking to a wall? That's what a breakdown in communication feels like. You can see them physically present, but emotionally, they're somewhere else entirely. They might be distracted by their phone, focused on work, or just simply uninterested in the conversation. And what's worse is that they often don't realize the effect this has on you. You feel unheard, unimportant, and even invisible. And yet, it's the first sign of something much deeper. When communication becomes strained, it often creates an emotional void. You begin to doubt your worth. You question why he's not interested in talking to you. You wonder if you're doing something wrong, but the truth is, you're not the problem. His actions or lack thereof are the problem. And the longer you let this pattern continue, the more it eats away at your confidence and trust in the relationship. So, how do you handle this shift in communication? The first step is to acknowledge it. Don't try to brush it off or convince yourself that it's just a phase. Recognize that communication is the glue that holds a relationship together. When that glue starts to weaken, it's time to address it head on. Start by opening up the conversation. Ask questions. Don't make assumptions, but gently probe to understand why things have changed. I've noticed that we don't talk as much as we used to. Is something on your mind? By addressing it directly, you give him the opportunity to express himself. But here's the key. Pay attention to his response. Is he willing to engage in the conversation, or does he brush it off? Does he show any effort to rebuild the communication, or does he stay distant? His actions here will speak louder than any words. If the communication gap continues to widen despite your efforts, it's time to face the truth. A relationship that lacks communication isn't just struggling, it's in danger. It's a major red flag that something isn't right. You cannot fix a relationship where communication is no longer a priority. And if he's not putting in the effort to communicate, it's time to ask yourself if this relationship is still serving you. Remember, you deserve to be with someone who makes you feel heard, valued, and understood. You deserve to be in a relationship where the conversation flows freely, where you both take time to connect on a deep level. If that's no longer happening, don't settle for the silence. Don't let the lack of communication become your new normal. The relationship you're in should make you feel alive, not ignored. Communication isn't just about words. It's about emotional connection. It's about sharing, listening, and responding in ways that nurture the bond you share. If that's gone, so is the foundation of your relationship. And if the effort to repair it isn't there, you must ask yourself whether it's worth continuing to invest in something that no longer serves your emotional well-being. You deserve better than this. Affection and intimacy are the foundation of any romantic relationship. They are the ways we express love, the ways we make each other feel desired and valued. But when those little gestures start to disappear, when the hugs, the kisses, and the intimate moments become few and far between, it's a glaring sign that something is wrong. You start to feel the absence of the physical connection that once kept you close, and that emptiness can begin to erode the relationship from the inside out. The early stages of a relationship are full of passion, touch, and affection. It's natural to want to hold hands, cuddle on the couch, kiss each other goodbye, and embrace when you've been apart. These small acts of physical connection are what bind you together. They create a sense of closeness and security, making both partners feel loved and important. But when that affection starts to fade away, the impact can be devastating. At first, it's subtle. Maybe he stops kissing you goodbye when he leaves for work. Perhaps the late-night cuddles that used to be so comforting become less frequent. Little by little, the intimacy that once flourished starts to diminish. You might notice that he's more distant, both physically and emotionally. Maybe he avoids eye contact or no longer reaches for your hand when you're out together. You might find yourself wondering, what happened? Why doesn't he want to be close to me anymore? This decline in affection is not just about physical touch, it's about emotional withdrawal. Intimacy, whether physical or emotional, is a sign of connection. It's an expression of love and trust. When someone stops being affectionate, they stop investing in the relationship. It's as if they've pulled back from nurturing the bond that once brought you together. Psychologically, physical touch and affection are vital for emotional well-being. They help release oxytocin, the love hormone, which strengthens feelings of attachment and security. Without this physical connection, feelings of loneliness, confusion, and insecurity can creep in. When someone withdraws affection, it's a signal that they are no longer emotionally engaged in the relationship. They are no longer committed to fostering the intimacy that once made the relationship thrive. This lack of affection can take many forms. It could be a decline in physical touch, or it could be a shift in how he reacts to your attempts at intimacy. Maybe when you try to kiss him, he pulls away or turns his cheek. Perhaps when you try to snuggle or hold his hand, he seems uncomfortable or uninterested. These changes may seem small on the surface, but they add up over time and create a noticeable gap between you. Now, it's important to recognize that a decrease in affection doesn't always mean that he's cheating. Sometimes stress, work pressures, or other life circumstances can lead to temporary emotional withdrawal. But when this pattern persists over time, it signals a deeper issue. If you've noticed a continuous decline in physical affection and intimacy, it's likely that the emotional connection is also in jeopardy. When intimacy is lost, it creates a void, a space that once was filled with closeness and connection but now feels empty and cold. This void can lead to feelings of rejection, self-doubt, and insecurity. You may start questioning yourself. Am I not attractive enough? Am I not lovable? Why doesn't he want me anymore? These feelings are painful, and they often lead you to seek answers where there may be none. However, it's crucial to understand that when affection fades, it's rarely about you. It's about the relationship itself. One partner may begin to lose interest or become emotionally distant, and as a result, the physical affection and closeness that once existed starts to wane. It's not necessarily a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of how much energy and emotional investment the other person is putting into the relationship. If they are not prioritizing affection and intimacy, it may indicate that they are no longer emotionally invested. If you've noticed a decrease in affection and intimacy, the next step is to address it. It's important not to ignore the signs, thinking they'll get better on their own. When affection starts to slip away, it's vital to communicate. Let your partner know how you're feeling. Share your thoughts and express how the lack of intimacy is affecting you. Open the conversation about what has changed and how it's making you feel. Don't approach it from a place of accusation, but from a place of vulnerability. Let him know that you miss the closeness and that you need it to feel secure in the relationship. However, it's also crucial to pay attention to his response. If he listens, acknowledges your feelings, and shows a willingness to reconnect emotionally and physically, it's a positive sign. It shows that he values the relationship and is willing to work on it. But if he dismisses your feelings, becomes defensive, or continues to withdraw, it's a clear indication that he's emotionally checked out. This kind of response often reveals that he's no longer invested in restoring the intimacy that once existed. Don't allow yourself to stay in a relationship where you're not receiving the affection and emotional connection you deserve. You are worthy of love, attention, and intimacy. If your partner is no longer willing to meet those needs, it's time to evaluate whether this relationship is truly fulfilling you. You should never have to beg for affection. True love is built on mutual respect and the desire to nurture the bond that holds you together. If the intimacy is gone, it doesn't just affect your relationship. It affects your emotional health. It leaves you feeling disconnected, unsure of where you stand, and questioning your place in his life. This emotional and physical withdrawal creates an imbalance that can't be ignored. The longer you let it slide, the harder it will be to rebuild that closeness. A relationship without intimacy isn't a partnership. It's just two people coexisting in the same space. Don't let your emotional needs go unmet. You deserve a connection where affection and intimacy are present, where love is actively nurtured, and where both partners are fully engaged in keeping the flame of the relationship alive. If that's not happening, it may be time to walk away and seek the emotional fulfillment that you truly deserve. Human behavior is often a reflection of inner thoughts and emotions. When someone is happy, comfortable, and emotionally connected, their behavior tends to be consistent. They show up in predictable ways, happy, engaged, and emotionally present. But when something shifts, when interest fades, or someone is emotionally withdrawing, their behavior starts to change. These changes can be subtle at first, but over time they become more pronounced. If your partner suddenly starts acting differently, it's a sign that something significant is happening underneath the surface. One of the most noticeable signs that something is wrong is a sudden change in behavior or routine. This can manifest in a variety of ways. He may start going out more often, spending more time away from home, or taking longer to return calls and text. The once predictable patterns of behavior that were part of your daily routine begin to shift. He's no longer as reliable or as present in your life. And that change, though often difficult to pinpoint, can feel like a growing void between the two of you. Initially, you may brush off these shifts. Maybe he's just stressed at work or dealing with personal issues that have nothing to do with the relationship. But as these changes continue, they start to feel like more than just random occurrences. They start to feel deliberate. He might start showing up late without a clear explanation, or he might start making excuses to avoid spending time with you. These little changes, though seemingly small, are warning signs that his priorities may be shifting away from the relationship. What you're experiencing is a pattern of avoidance. Avoidance is a defense mechanism. When someone is feeling emotionally distant or has lost interest, they begin to avoid situations where they would have to engage emotionally. Instead of spending quality time with you, they create space. They pull away. They might even start to avoid intimacy altogether, whether that's physical or emotional. The more they avoid, the more they begin to withdraw from the connection, and the less involved they become in the relationship. Psychologically, when someone is no longer emotionally engaged, they often begin to develop what's called a distancing behavior. This distancing is their way of protecting themselves from facing difficult emotions or confronting a relationship that no longer feels fulfilling. This can include everything from being late to avoiding certain topics of conversation to suddenly becoming more critical or less responsive. When avoidance becomes a pattern, it creates emotional distance and sets the stage for the complete breakdown of the relationship. Another aspect of behavioral change is the shift in how much effort is being put into the relationship. In the beginning, when the relationship is fresh and exciting, both partners tend to invest a lot of energy into it. You make time for each other, you do things to show you care, and you put in the effort to maintain that connection. But when interest wanes, so does the effort. The once thoughtful gestures, whether it's bringing flowers home, planning dates, or simply texting just to check in, begin to fade. The small acts that once made you feel special become non-existent, leaving you questioning whether you're still important to him. This shift in behavior can also extend to his treatment of you. He might become less patient, more irritable, or start criticizing you more often. What was once a relationship built on understanding and compromise now feels like a series of miscommunications and misunderstandings. The kindness, respect, and consideration that once defined your interactions are replaced with coldness and distance. The emotional investment on his part starts to feel one-sided, as if you're the only one still putting effort into the relationship. What's even more alarming is when these changes are paired with secrecy. As his behavior shifts, you might notice that he starts hiding things from you. He becomes more protective of his phone, his social media accounts, and his schedule. What used to be transparent now seems guarded, and he might give vague or inconsistent answers when you ask about his whereabouts or what he's been doing. Secrecy, especially when paired with a change in routine or behavior, is a clear sign that something isn't right. It often signals that he's hiding something, perhaps another emotional investment or even a physical one. These behavioral changes don't happen overnight. They begin slowly, almost imperceptibly. But as time passes, they become more obvious. The more someone tries to emotionally detach, the more noticeable their behavior becomes. You might start feeling like a stranger in your own relationship, unable to recognize the person standing in front of you. The person who once seemed to know you so well, who used to show affection and make you feel like a priority, now seems distant and uninterested. In these moments, your instincts are crucial. If you're feeling confused or hurt by these behavioral shifts, don't ignore your feelings. Trust your intuition. These changes are telling you something about his emotional state and the state of the relationship. No matter how much you want to deny it or pretend things will get better, you have to face the reality that the behavior you're seeing might not be a temporary phase. It could be a sign of something deeper. So what do you do when you start noticing these changes? First, take a step back and observe. Notice the patterns. Ask yourself if these changes are part of a larger shift in his overall behavior. Are they consistent, or are they just isolated incidents? Do they make you feel distant, confused, or insecure? Once you've recognized the changes, have a conversation. Don't accuse, but express how his behavior is making you feel. Approach it from a place of concern, not confrontation. The goal is to understand whether this is a temporary issue or a symptom of a larger problem. If, after addressing the issue, his behavior doesn't change and he continues to withdraw, it's important to acknowledge that this could be a sign of something more serious. If he's no longer putting in the effort, if he's no longer engaging emotionally, or if his behavior continues to shift without explanation, it's likely that he's losing interest or emotionally detaching from the relationship. And as hard as it is to face, sometimes it's better to acknowledge the truth and move forward than to keep investing in something that no longer serves you. You deserve someone who makes you a priority, who is consistent in their efforts, and who is emotionally present. Don't settle for a relationship where behavior and attention constantly fluctuate. If his changes in routine and behavior continue to distance you, it's time to take a step back and evaluate whether this is the relationship that truly deserves your time and energy. You deserve stability, trust, and a connection that uplifts you, not one that leaves you constantly questioning where you stand. Communication is the bedrock of every healthy relationship. It's the way we connect, express our feelings, and resolve conflicts. Without it, a relationship becomes disconnected, leading to frustration, confusion, and a sense of isolation. When a partner begins to emotionally withdraw, the silence can become deafening. Words that once flowed easily are replaced with distance, and the bond that once felt so strong begins to fade. If your partner's communication patterns have shifted, it's time to pay attention. Emotional withdrawal doesn't always happen suddenly. At first, it might be subtle. He might start giving shorter responses to your questions, or you might notice that he no longer shares his thoughts and feelings with you like he used to. Conversations that were once deep and meaningful become surface-level exchanges. You might ask him how his day was, but instead of engaging, he gives a one-word answer. Or perhaps he avoids talking about important matters altogether, brushing off concerns or acting like it's no big deal. This lack of communication can feel like a wall has been built between you, and no matter how hard you try to break it down, it remains unyielding. The change in communication can also show up in how he responds to your emotional needs. When you're upset or feeling vulnerable, does he listen, or does he shut down, avoid eye contact, or offer dismissive responses? In a healthy relationship, both partners make an effort to understand and support each other's emotional needs. But when emotional withdrawal occurs, one partner may start to pull away at the very times when emotional connection is most needed. This can leave you feeling unsupported, neglected, and uncertain about where you stand in the relationship. One of the most painful aspects of emotional withdrawal is the feeling that you're no longer a priority. When communication diminishes, you may begin to question if he even cares about your thoughts, your feelings, or your well-being. The silence can be deafening, and the lack of effort to engage emotionally can make you feel invisible. You might feel like you're talking to a stranger rather than someone you once had a deep connection with. It's as if he's physically there, but emotionally, he's miles away. Psychologically, emotional withdrawal often signals that one person is no longer invested in the relationship. Communication takes effort. It requires vulnerability, openness, and a willingness to engage in difficult conversations. When someone is emotionally checked out, they stop putting in that effort. Instead of working through challenges, they avoid them. Instead of offering comfort or support, they become distant and disengaged. The silence is often a form of avoidance, a way to avoid confronting difficult emotions or situations. But while it may feel easier for him in the short term, it creates lasting damage in the relationship. This emotional distance can be incredibly confusing. When communication is strong, you feel heard, understood, and valued. But when it disappears, you feel isolated and unsure of what's happening. You might wonder if it's something you did, or if he's simply growing bored of the relationship. It's natural to internalize the silence, but it's important to remember that emotional withdrawal is often more about the other person's inability or unwillingness to engage than about any personal shortcomings. When communication breaks down, it also affects the way you both resolve conflicts. In a healthy relationship, disagreements are inevitable, but they can be worked through with understanding and compromise. However, when one partner is emotionally withdrawn, conflict resolution becomes nearly impossible. Arguments might be avoided, swept under the rug, or dismissed entirely. The inability or unwillingness to communicate during a disagreement can lead to unresolved issues piling up, creating resentment and frustration. Over time, this lack of communication begins to chip away at the foundation of the relationship. The emotional connection that once felt so strong starts to fray, leaving both partners feeling misunderstood and distant. When you're no longer able to have meaningful conversations or connect on a deeper level, the relationship begins to lose its sense of intimacy and closeness. The shared experiences, the inside jokes, the dreams for the future, everything that once brought you together starts to feel distant and unreachable. But emotional withdrawal isn't always about the relationship itself. It can be a reflection of what's going on inside the person. Sometimes emotional distance is a coping mechanism, a way for someone to protect themselves from feelings of vulnerability or insecurity. If he's dealing with personal struggles, stress, or feelings of inadequacy, he might retreat into silence as a way of avoiding confronting those emotions. This doesn't mean he doesn't care about the relationship. It simply means that he's struggling to open up or communicate in a healthy way. However, just because his emotional withdrawal is rooted in his own issues doesn't make it any less hurtful or damaging to the relationship. When you notice this pattern, it's important to address it head on. But it's crucial to approach the situation with empathy, understanding, and patience. If emotional withdrawal is a result of personal struggles or stress, offer support, but also make it clear that you need communication and emotional connection in the relationship. Share how the silence makes you feel and express that while you understand he may be going through difficult times, you also need to feel valued and heard. At the same time, it's important to observe how he responds. If he acknowledges your feelings and makes an effort to open up, that's a positive sign. It shows that he values the relationship and is willing to work on improving communication. But if he continues to withdraw, becomes defensive, or shows no desire to engage emotionally, it's an indication that he may be emotionally checked out of the relationship. The lack of communication may be a sign that he no longer sees the relationship as a priority, or that he's not willing to invest the necessary effort to make things work. The most important thing you can do when faced with emotional withdrawal is to prioritize your own emotional well-being. You deserve a relationship where communication is open, where your feelings are heard, and where both partners make the effort to engage with each other. Don't stay in a relationship where you feel emotionally neglected or isolated. If your attempts to reconnect are met with continued silence, it may be time to reevaluate the relationship. You deserve someone who is present, emotionally available, and committed to nurturing the connection between you. Physical affection plays a vital role in maintaining emotional intimacy within a relationship. It's the nonverbal way of showing love, care, and connection. From holding hands to cuddling, these small gestures serve as daily reminders that you are loved, valued, and prioritized. When that physical closeness starts to fade away, it can be a warning sign that something deeper is wrong. In any healthy relationship, physical affection isn't just limited to moments of passion or sexual intimacy. It's the simple things: affectionate touches, playful nudges, and spontaneous hugs. These actions keep the emotional bond strong and provide a sense of security and warmth. When physical affection starts to dwindle, it leaves behind an emotional void that's hard to fill. The relationship begins to feel distant and the connection weakens. If your partner suddenly stops initiating affection, it's an early sign that something isn't right. At first, it might feel like a temporary change. Maybe he's stressed, tired, or going through something difficult. You might try to justify the lack of affection, telling yourself it's just a phase. But as time goes on, you begin to notice that the touches are fewer and farther between. The good morning kiss becomes a distant memory, and the once warm embraces seem to have disappeared altogether. This shift in physical affection can start with the small things. He might no longer reach for your hand in public, or offer a gentle touch when you're sitting together. The little moments of connection that once felt so natural begin to fade. What was once a warm, comforting closeness starts to feel cold and distant. You might feel like you're living with a stranger rather than the person you once felt so connected to. The psychological impact of a lack of physical affection is profound. Touch is a basic human need. It releases oxytocin, the hormone associated with bonding and trust. When we are deprived of touch, our emotional state can be negatively affected. We begin to feel neglected, disconnected, and insecure. We may even start to question our worth in the relationship. If our partner no longer finds us worthy of affection, it can lead to feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. As humans, we need physical touch to thrive emotionally. It's a form of reassurance that we are loved, seen, and cared for. Without it, we begin to feel invisible and unimportant. If you're in a relationship where the physical affection is disappearing, you might feel like your emotional needs are being ignored. This can lead to a deeper sense of frustration, resentment, and loneliness. It's not just about the lack of hugs or kisses. It's about feeling emotionally abandoned. The absence of physical affection can also signal a deeper emotional distance. When someone is emotionally checked out, they often withdraw physically as well. This can manifest in avoidance of intimate moments or a reluctance to engage in close contact. If he's no longer interested in holding your hand or being physically affectionate with you, it may be a sign that he's mentally and emotionally disengaged from the relationship. The affection that was once given freely now feels forced or absent altogether. Another important factor to consider is that physical affection is often a reflection of the overall emotional health of the relationship. When both partners are emotionally connected and satisfied, physical affection flows naturally. It's not something that has to be consciously forced or manufactured, but when one person begins to pull away emotionally, the physical affection tends to dwindle as well. It becomes a sign that the emotional foundation of the relationship is beginning to crack. It's also worth noting that the disappearance of physical affection may not always be due to a lack of love. Sometimes it's a symptom of stress or other personal issues that your partner may be dealing with. If your partner is going through a tough time at work, struggling with his own mental health, or feeling overwhelmed by external pressures, he might unintentionally withdraw. While it's important to be compassionate and patient, it's also crucial to recognize that emotional distance can have a ripple effect on the relationship. If you're noticing the disappearance of physical affection, it's time to have an honest conversation. Express how the lack of affection makes you feel and ask if there's something deeper going on. It's important to approach this conversation with care, without placing blame or making accusations. Focus on your feelings and how the absence of affection has impacted your emotional connection. This conversation should be an opportunity to reconnect. However, if the conversation doesn't lead to positive change and the physical affection continues to dwindle, it may be a sign that the emotional distance is too great to bridge. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, a relationship can reach a point where the emotional connection cannot be restored. If your partner continues to withdraw physically and emotionally despite your attempts to address the issue, it's important to evaluate whether the relationship is still meeting your emotional needs. You deserve a relationship where physical affection is abundant, where emotional intimacy is nurtured, and where both partners make the effort to stay connected. A lack of affection is not just about the absence of touch. It's a reflection of the emotional distance that has grown between you. When this happens, it's essential to take a step back and assess whether this relationship is still fulfilling and whether your emotional well-being is being prioritized. Physical affection is a powerful tool for maintaining emotional intimacy. It fosters trust, builds connection, and strengthens the bond between two people. If that affection is disappearing, it's not something to ignore. It's a sign that something has changed and it's worth investigating. Don't settle for a relationship where physical affection is absent. You deserve to feel loved, valued, and connected. If your partner is no longer willing to show affection, it may be time to reconsider the relationship and prioritize your own emotional health. People are always evolving, and it's natural for individuals to pick up new interests, develop new hobbies, or explore new passions. However, when someone suddenly starts pursuing a wide range of new activities, especially ones that seem to come out of nowhere, it can signal something deeper going on. If your partner begins devoting excessive time and energy to new interests or activities that they never expressed much interest in before, it may be a red flag that they are pulling away from the relationship. At first, these new hobbies might seem harmless. After all, having personal interests outside the relationship is perfectly normal and even healthy. But when the pursuit of these new hobbies becomes all-consuming, it can create emotional distance. A partner who once spent quality time with you may now seem preoccupied with new pursuits, leaving you feeling neglected and disconnected. This sudden shift in focus can leave you wondering if the relationship is still a priority for them, or if they're looking for something or someone else to fill the void that they may be feeling. The psychological impact of this change can be significant. Relationships thrive on shared experiences and mutual interests. When one partner begins to engage in activities without the other, it can lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness. It's not necessarily that they're deliberately trying to push you away, but it's easy to feel sidelined when they start dedicating more time and energy to things that don't involve you. You may begin to question if you're still as important to them as you once were. Take a moment to reflect on the nature of these new hobbies. Are they something that your partner has always been passionate about but never had the chance to explore before? Or are they entirely new interests that have come out of nowhere, often with little explanation? If these new activities seem out of character, or if your partner has suddenly become obsessed with something they never showed interest in before, it's worth considering whether this is a symptom of emotional withdrawal. Sometimes the pursuit of new hobbies is a way for someone to create emotional distance without directly confronting the issues in the relationship. It's easier to bury oneself in a new project, sport, or activity than to face the discomfort of addressing relationship problems. If your partner seems to be constantly busy with these new interests and becomes defensive or irritated when you try to discuss it, it's a clear indication that they may be using these hobbies as an escape. This not only prevents them from dealing with the underlying issues in the relationship, but it also keeps them emotionally distant from you. Another potential red flag is the secrecy or lack of transparency that can accompany these new interests. If your partner starts spending more time out of the house or engaging in activities without you, and when asked about them, they become vague or evasive, it's a sign that something isn't quite right. Relationships thrive on trust, and when one partner starts hiding their actions or keeping secrets, it can feel like a betrayal. This sense of mystery can stir up feelings of insecurity and doubt, making you question what's really going on. Moreover, when one person starts investing more time in their own interests, it can also disrupt the sense of partnership and teamwork in the relationship. Relationships require effort from both sides to nurture and maintain emotional intimacy. If your partner is constantly pursuing their own goals without considering how it impacts you, it may suggest that they no longer feel committed to building the relationship together. They might be growing more focused on themselves and less focused on nurturing the connection between the two of you. This shift in focus can also be indicative of a deeper dissatisfaction with the relationship itself. Often, when someone begins to withdraw emotionally, they start searching for ways to fill the void. New hobbies or activities can act as a distraction, providing them with an outlet for their unhappiness. Rather than confronting the issues at hand, they bury themselves in new pursuits that help them avoid facing the uncomfortable truths about their emotional distance. This pattern can lead to a lack of balance in the relationship. Relationships require compromise, understanding, and shared experiences. If your partner is spending all their free time on activities that exclude you, it leaves little room for the shared moments that once brought you closer together. Over time, this imbalance can erode the emotional connection that holds the relationship together. When one partner is constantly preoccupied with their own interests, the relationship can start to feel one-sided, leaving the other person feeling undervalued and unimportant. On the flip side, it's important to remember that some level of personal space and independence is healthy in any relationship. It's essential for individuals to maintain their own interests and passions outside the relationship. However, the key is balance. If your partner's new hobbies are becoming excessive and taking priority over spending time with you or nurturing your relationship, it's time to assess whether this behavior is a sign of emotional withdrawal or dissatisfaction. It's important to evaluate whether these new pursuits are being used as a healthy outlet for personal growth, or if they're being used to avoid dealing with relationship issues. To address this issue, it's crucial to communicate openly with your partner. Express your concerns in a non-confrontational way and ask them how they feel about the relationship and why they have become so invested in their new hobbies. Make it clear that you value their need for personal space, but also emphasize the importance of spending quality time together. If your partner is willing to listen and make an effort to find a balance between their personal pursuits and your relationship, it can lead to growth and mutual understanding. However, if your partner is defensive, dismissive, or uninterested in finding a compromise, it may be an indication that they are no longer fully invested in the relationship. When one partner constantly prioritizes their own hobbies over the relationship, it can signal a lack of commitment and emotional withdrawal. In such cases, it may be necessary to reevaluate the relationship and decide whether your emotional needs are being met. Ultimately, relationships require mutual effort and dedication. If your partner's new hobbies are taking precedence over spending time with you, it's a sign that their emotional investment may be shifting. The key is to address the issue early. Have open conversations and determine whether both of you are still equally committed to the relationship. You deserve to feel like a priority, and it's important to assess whether your partner shares that same commitment. Emotional withdrawal is one of the most telling signs that a partner may be losing interest or worse, already emotionally checked out. The emotional connection that once bonded you both begins to fade. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly are replaced by silence, awkwardness, or even indifference. The changes are subtle at first, but grow over time, leaving you questioning what happened to the deep emotional bond that once held the relationship together. At the heart of emotional withdrawal is a lack of communication. Healthy relationships thrive on open dialogue, mutual sharing, and emotional vulnerability. When these aspects start to vanish, it becomes a glaring indication that something has shifted. If your partner suddenly becomes distant, stops sharing their thoughts or feelings, or begins to give one-word answers to your questions, it may be a sign that they are withdrawing emotionally. This shift can often be accompanied by a sense of silence in the relationship. It's not just that your partner isn't talking about their day, but they also stop expressing their emotions in a way that is meaningful. At the beginning of the relationship, sharing hopes, fears, and dreams might have come naturally. Now these conversations feel forced, and when you try to engage, you are met with a cold or detached response. It's as though the emotional walls have been erected and communication has become a one-way street.